I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd end up in this situation. My life seemed pretty typical. A decent job, a comfortable home, and a wife I'd been with for over 20 years. But everything changed the day I discovered her betrayal. It all started with a subtle shift. Sarah, my wife, had been acting distant for a while. At first I chalked it up to the usual midlife crisis stuff. Kids growing up, hitting 40-something, the routine of daily life. But then I started noticing the little things, the late nights at work, the guarded phone calls, the sudden interest in her appearance. One evening I decided to follow her. I felt like a stalker, but I needed to know the truth. She left the house, supposedly to meet a friend, but instead she drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her get out of the car and enter the building. I waited for what felt like hours, though it was probably only about 20 minutes. Then I saw him, a man I didn't recognize, leave the hotel room she'd entered. I confronted her that night. She denied it at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. I saw the guilt in her eyes. She eventually broke down and confessed, admitting that she'd been seeing this guy for months. She said it was just a fling, something meaningless. But to me, it was everything. It shattered the foundation of our marriage, and I felt a rage I'd never experienced before. I tried to keep my cool, but the anger was consuming me. I wanted to confront the guy she was seeing, to teach him a lesson. I did some digging and found out where he worked. One evening, I waited for him outside his office. When he finally appeared, I approached him, trying to stay calm. I demanded to know why he was messing with my wife. He just smirked, a smug expression that made my blood boil. I couldn't control myself. I lunged at him, fists flying. He fought back, and it turned into an all-out brawl right there on the street. We were both bloodied by the time someone pulled us apart. I left him there, feeling both victorious and defeated. Back at home, things were tense. Sarah and I tried to talk it out, but every conversation ended in shouting. We went to marriage counseling, but it felt like a waste of time. The trust was gone, and without it, there was nothing left to salvage. One night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep living a lie. The next morning, I told Sarah I wanted a divorce. She cried, begged me to reconsider, but my mind was made up. The love I once felt for her had turned to bitterness. We sold the house and split our belongings. The divorce process was long and painful, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I moved into a small apartment, far from the life we'd built together. I tried to keep myself busy, but the loneliness was suffocating. One evening, I decided to go for a walk, hoping to clear my mind. As I strolled through the park, I saw a couple sitting on a bench, holding hands and laughing. It reminded me of what I'd once had, and I felt a pang of regret. But I knew there was no going back. Life after the divorce was a blur of emptiness. I tried dating, but every relationship felt shallow. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the nagging thought that I'd never be able to trust anyone again. My job, once a source of pride, became a monotonous routine. I went through the motions, but my heart wasn't in it. Then one day, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She looked different, happier somehow. We exchanged awkward pleasantries, and she told me she'd met someone new. I felt a strange mix of emotions, jealousy, sadness, and a hint of relief. Maybe she deserved to be happy, even if it wasn't with me. After that encounter, I started to reevaluate my life. I realized that I needed to let go of the past if I ever wanted to move forward. I began seeing a therapist, someone who could help me work through my anger and pain. It wasn't easy, but slowly, I started to heal. I took up new hobbies, things I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. I joined a gym, started hiking, and even took a cooking class. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope for the future. But despite all the progress, there were still nights when the loneliness crept in. I'd lie in bed, staring at the empty space beside me, wondering if I'd ever find someone to fill it. The divorce had left a scar, a reminder of the love I'd lost, and the betrayal that had torn my world apart. Dear viewers, more than 90% watch my content without subscribing. If you still have not subscribed, then I ask you to do so. For me, this is the best motivation to continue. One evening, I decided to join a local community group that focused on outdoor activities. They organized weekend trips, hikes, and social gatherings. It was a way to meet new people and distract myself from the emptiness that often consumed me. On one of these trips, I met Emily. She was in her early 40s with a warm smile and an infectious laugh. We hit it off instantly, bonding over our shared love for nature and adventure. Unlike the shallow relationships I'd encountered before, Emily felt genuine, real. We started spending more time together, both within the group and on our own. Our connection grew, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't with anyone else since Sarah. I told her about the betrayal, the divorce, and the lingering pain. She listened without judgment, offering support and understanding. Our relationship evolved slowly. Emily was patient with me, respecting my need for space and time to heal. We enjoyed simple things together, hiking, cooking meals, and watching movies. It was a stark contrast to the chaos and emotional turmoil of my previous relationship. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. As our bond deepened, so did my feelings for her. Emily was everything I needed, kind, supportive, and loving. But with those feelings came fear. The scars from Sarah's betrayal were still fresh, and the thought of being hurt again was terrifying. I struggled with trust, constantly questioning whether I could fully let my guard down. One evening, after a particularly wonderful day spent together, I decided to take a leap of faith. We were sitting on her porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the moment felt perfect. I turned to Emily, my heart pounding, and said, "You know, I love you, right? And I'm not going anywhere." She looked at me with those warm, understanding eyes and smiled. "I know. And I love you too. We're in this together." Her words were a balm to my soul. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for so long. In that moment, I knew that while the past would always be a part of me, it didn't have to define my future. Our relationship flourished after that. We traveled, explored new places, and built a life together. The pain of the past never completely disappeared, but it no longer defined me. I learned to live in the moment, to appreciate the love I had found. Years later, as I looked back on my journey, I realized how far I'd come. The betrayal that once shattered me had become a distant memory. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever the future held. But there were still nights when I lay awake, wondering if the scars would ever completely fade. The divorce had changed me, left me with a lingering sense of unease. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the man I used to be. And as I stared into the darkness, I whispered a silent promise to myself to keep moving forward, to embrace the unknown, and to never let the past define me again. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. However, just as I started to feel comfortable in my new life with Emily, an unexpected turn of events shook me to my core. One evening, as we were preparing dinner together, I received a call from an unknown number. Curious, I answered it. "Is this Mark?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Detective Harris. I need to speak with you about Sarah." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't spoken to or heard about Sarah in months. "What about her?" "There's been an incident. It's important that you come down to the station." I felt a cold dread settle over me. I told Emily what was happening and rushed to the police station. When I arrived, Detective Harris led me to a small, dimly lit room. He sat across from me, a serious expression on his face. "Sarah was found dead in her apartment last night," he said bluntly. I was stunned. "What happened?" "We're still investigating, but it appears to be foul play. We need to ask you some questions." The next few hours were a blur of interrogation and confusion. They wanted to know about our relationship, our divorce, and if I'd had any contact with her recently. I answered as best as I could, my mind racing with a mix of shock and grief. Over the next few days, the reality of Sarah's death began to sink in. I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness for her loss, anger at whoever had done this, and a disconcerting sense of relief that she was no longer a part of my life. It was a confusing and tumultuous time. As the investigation progressed, I was pulled deeper into the mystery surrounding her death. It turned out that Sarah had been involved in some questionable activities after our divorce. She'd made enemies, and it seemed one of them had finally caught up with her. Dear viewers, I ask you to subscribe to the channel under this video. I will be very grateful to you. I couldn't help but feel a morbid curiosity about her life after me. I learned from Detective Harris that she had been dating a string of men, some of whom had criminal backgrounds. It was a far cry from the woman I'd known and loved. One night, as I was going through some old photos, I found a picture of us from our early years together. We looked so happy, so in love. I couldn't reconcile that image with the person she'd become. It was like looking at a stranger. The investigation eventually led to the arrest of a suspect, one of her recent boyfriends, a man with a violent past. The evidence was damning, and he was charged with her murder. The trial was a media circus, dredging up details of Sarah's life that I wished I could forget. Through it all, Emily stood by me, her support unwavering, but I could see the strain it was putting on her. The constant reminder of my past, the media attention, and my emotional turmoil were taking their toll on our relationship. One evening, after a particularly intense day in court, Emily and I had a heated argument. She felt like she was living in the shadow of my past, constantly competing with the ghost of Sarah. I couldn't blame her. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. "I love you, Mark, but I can't keep living like this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You need to let go of the past, for both of us." Her words hit me hard. I realized that, in my quest for closure and justice, I'd been neglecting the one person who truly mattered. I apologized, promising to focus on our future together. The trial eventually concluded, with the suspect being found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. It brought a sense of closure, but also a deep sadness. Sarah's death was a tragic end to a complicated life. Emily and I took a much-needed vacation, hoping to leave the past behind and start anew. We went to a quiet cabin in the mountains, away from the chaos of our everyday lives. It was a time to reconnect, to heal. But even in the serenity of the mountains, I couldn't completely escape the memories. One night, as we sat by the fire, Emily took my hand. "I know this has been hard for you, but we have to move forward. We can't let the past dictate our future." She was right. I needed to let go, to focus on the present and the life we were building together. It wasn't easy, but with Emily's love and support, I started to find peace. We returned home, determined to make a fresh start. I focused on my work, finding new projects that reignited my passion. Emily and I planned trips, explored new hobbies, and strengthened our bond. Life gradually settled into a new normal. The shadow of Sarah's death faded, replaced by the warmth and love of my relationship with Emily. The scars were still there, but they no longer defined me. Years passed, and Emily and I built a life filled with love, laughter, and adventure. We faced challenges together, supporting each other through the highs and lows. The pain of the past became a distant memory, a reminder of how far we'd come. But even with the happiness I found, there were moments when I wondered what might have been. The what-ifs and could-have-beens lingered in the back of my mind. It was a part of me, a chapter of my life that I couldn't completely close. One evening, as Emily and I watched the sunset from our porch, she turned to me and said, "I'm proud of you, Mark. You've come a long way." I smiled, feeling a sense of contentment. I couldn't have done it without you. And as we sat there, hand in hand, I realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer controlled my future. I had found love again, and with it, the strength to face whatever came next. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered a silent promise to myself to keep moving forward, to cherish the present, and to never let the past define me again.